Which race is the best race in WoW? It's one of those timeless questions, isn't it? You know, like, what is the meaning of life? Are we alone in the universe? And why aren't you subscribed to my YouTube channel when the content is evidently so highbrow?
Giant fucking codpiece. Sheep for your depraved sexual purposes?
People have been arguing over which race is the best in WoW since the Dark Ages, citing everything from complex gameplay simulations to decades of lore to profound and well-researched statements like gnomes are fucking weird and if you play one you need to jump in a skip. Some wishy-washy people, who probably play Tauren by the way, argue that you can really be into more than one race in WoW, but this is simply not true. A choice must be made, like which do you prefer, Ada or Claire? The correct answer is Ashley, by the way. Remake version, of course. People can only have one favourite race in the game. In all honesty, I wouldn't be surprised if whilst digging through the ruins at Pompeii, you came across an ancient Roman tablet inscribed with the Latin phrase, "If you don't play an orc, then you ain't getting the pork." But what is the best race in WoW? Well, I can answer that for you, being a true scholar of the game, and an S-tier player, if ever there was one. The reality is, until you've come face to face with a Goldshire roleplayer who can alternate between playing a submissive night elf or a boomkin with a foot-long meatball marinara, you've just not experienced all that WoW has to offer. But I have, and I'll leave that story for another time. So which is the best race? Well, let me ask you this. What do you get if you combine the American Midwest with medieval England and Resident Evil? The answer, of course, is Lordaeron around the beginning of World of Warcraft. And I'm going to explain to you, with both facts, and perhaps even a little bit of logic, why the undead are the undisputed kings of WoW. Or at least, they were. You see, long before Blizzard watched one too many Tim Burton movies and decided to plaster that aesthetic all over the Forsaken in Wrath, their story was really bleak. This was a disparate band of the living dead, abandoned by their former friends and relatives, clinging on in ruined, decaying houses with about as much hope as the Overwatch community.
Shots fired, I'm taking...
And this bleak atmosphere was absolutely fantastic. Let me give you a prime example of what made the Forsaken so amazing in Classic. Let's look at the Agaman Mills. Now the short version of this story is simply that one area of farmland in the north of Tirisfal tried to hold out against the Scourge, led by the proud yet stubborn Agamand family. Not to be confused with this guy, he's a pig. As you could well expect, this noble attempt by the farmers to stand their ground didn't go very well, and after a few days of brave resistance, the mills were overrun and each member of the Agamand family was turned into their own variant of Scooby-Doo villain. So far, so normal, right? We've seen stuff like this everywhere in WoW. But here's what makes this special. We can ignore the sublime way in which the torn, desolate windmills loom over you as you explore the haunted farms, or the unique ways in which the plague of undeath has horrifically twisted each member of this family. Visuals like this are everywhere in Classic WoW and are part of what makes the game so iconic as a whole. But what makes this quest special is the insight it gives us into the society of the Forsaken, how they feel about their past lives, and how they are struggling to find meaning and a future in this new undead society. And we get this insight from all corners of that society. Take Deathguard Dillinger for example, a guy with a name straight out of Metal Gear Solid, whose job it is to protect the Forsaken settlement of Brill from the ever-present threats of the Scourge and the Scarlet Crusade. Dealing with the threat from the Agaman Mills is just another job for him, and yet you get a sense that the Forsaken really are fighting a constant existential battle from which there is no rest. You get a similar vibe from the town magistrate, with the added element that he's clearly worried about his own position and the political situation. But it's with Coleman Farthing that you get a true insight into what it means to be a Forsaken in Classic World of Warcraft. You see, Coleman worked for the Agamand family when he was still alive, and he even fought with them, standing by their side when the Scourge assailed their farms. Now, in Undeath, he cannot set aside his contempt for those he blames for his fate. He urges you to slay the family members who are now minions of the Scourge for the good of the Forsaken, of course, but also to satisfy his own vengeance by bringing him their remains. And finally, we have the story of Yvette Farthing no less, the sister of Coleman. Her story is not one of vengeance or one of survival like her brother and the officials of the Forsaken, but rather one of tragedy. When out questing in the mills, you find upon one of the corpses of the Scourge minions you defeat an undelivered letter which starts a quest. This letter was from Thurman Agamand, the elder son of the family, and, as it turns out, Yvette's lover. In this letter, Thurman begins by explaining his father's courageous yet foolhardy decision to fortify the mills and defend them against the Scourge. He then goes on to recount how the Scourge infiltrated their defences in the dark of night and decimated the farmers who had stayed to help defend the mills. If you take the time to read this, you can picture the horror of ghouls and skeletal warriors appearing out of the dark, creeping upon you in a place which you thought was safe. Kinda like surviving a night out in Leeds, by the way. But it gets worse. Thurman writes to Yvette of the betrayal of Devlin, the youngest Agamand brother, and of how he went over to the Scourge, joining them at the cost of the very lives of his loved ones. Now, with a name like Devlin, I wouldn't be surprised if he was horrendously bullied as a kid, and I'm not sure if he was just a bit salty that his mixtape didn't go viral on SoundCloud, but I'll try not to take the piss here too much. I don't want to ruin the point that I'm making. Thurman ends his letter by encouraging Yvette to find a way to live and to be happy, for as long as she survives and escapes the Scourge, he will rest easy in death. And here we have the truth of why the Forsaken were the most interesting, the most well-written, the most unique race in classic WoW. You see, both Thurman and Yvette lose everything. Their fates could not be more tragic. For his part, Thurman dies, betrayed by his brother, transformed into a gibbering, wretched zombie, forced to serve the very threat he died to fight against. He didn't rest peacefully in death. And as for Yvette, she wouldn't survive, well, not in the way Thurman wished. She died too, and eventually gained her free will as a Forsaken to live on in undeath in the ruins of the land she once knew. There would be no happiness for her, and when you bring her Thurman's letter, you see for a brief moment the sadness of a woman who has lost everything, before the veil is raised once again, and she confirms that she is now Forsaken, and all that life which came before has gone. This is just one of many quest chains which highlights the uniquely human plight of the undead in Classic. To some, they might just seem like another zombie-style fantasy race, but in truth, Blizzard did something magical here, flipping the script on the tired, undead trope by making them the survivors, surrounded by enemies, including the living, who would hunt them down as monsters. It's a wonderful subversion of an old theme, and Blizzard did so well here. But then they went and fucked it up. How, you might ask? Cataclysm. Yeah, they fucked up a lot of things in WoW during the Cataclysm. Turns out the old gods were corrupting more than Deathwing in that expansion. I'm pretty sure C. Thune and Yogg Sharon slipped a tentacle or two up the developers' arses and started puppeting them around. So many things went in the shitter. But the Forsaken questline in Silver Pine was really cool, I hear you say. And what about the Hillsbrad memes with Johnny Awesome? That was funny, right? Yeah, all that shit was great. Back in 2011. Do you know what else I thought was great back then? Party Rock fucking Anthem. I thought it was so cool, I even learned the stupid shuffle dance to impress my friends at school, which it did, by the way. That's how bizarre 2011 was. And before you laugh at me, I bet if you were a teenager back then, you learned the dance too. Bet I was better at it though. Anyway, my point here is that loads of stuff felt great when it first came out with Cataclysm back then, and jokes aside, the expansion of the Forsaken was interesting and a natural way to evolve their storyline. The thing is, in doing so, Blizzard moved further and further away from the existentialism and tragedy that made the Forsaken so interesting, transforming them from a small, beset group of renegades into a colossal horde of, well, zombies. This transition actually started in Wrath, and a big part of it was connected to the defeat of the Lich King, who of course posed the main threat to the Forsaken throughout the Classic period. But it was really in Cataclysm that the focus turned from the Forsaken as fundamentally human individuals existing in a state of undeath to a monolithic entity, a new faction of slaves with no will of their own. The emphasis was placed firmly and fully on Sylvanas alone. Now, I'm not going to complain about Sylvanas, certainly not Cataclysm era Sylvanas. She was an S-tier goth, elf, waifu. It's perfection, and if you don't agree with me, you're obviously not an undead player, and your favourite racial leader probably looks like Slave Ass from Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Let's have a like and sub for that reference, please and thank you. But there really was no reason why Blizzard needed to advance Sylvanas' character at the expense of the Forsaken as a whole, and ever since that time, The story of the undead has meandered along this path of them just wanting to conquer, wear black, and talk about how much they loved Sylvanas until, they didn't anymore. On a side note, Blizzard basically did the exact same thing with the orcs from this point onwards as well, which was also shit in the long run as it traded a super unique fantasy race and culture for something much more generic, but that's another story for another video. The irony here is that the one character that Blizzard pushed from Cata onwards within the Forsaken, who really became a fan favourite, Lillian Voss, is the one character who continued to emphasise that tragic conflict at the heart of the classic Forsaken. Ultimately, this trend of turning the undead into a complete caricature has continued, and whilst the character arc of Sylvanas essentially turning into a second Lich King and eventually being overthrown would have made for a great opportunity to link back round to that existentialism the Forsaken once had, the honestly messed up, convoluted nature of both Sylvanas' story and WoW's modern narrative as a whole has meant that this opportunity has been totally squandered. I make no attempt to hide my bias when it comes to the Forsaken. My all-time favourite classic race-class combination in WoW is Undead Rogue, preferably in full Bloodfang with a Thunder Fury and a Maladath, chasing you down in Elwyn Forest like a fucking Nazgul on speed. Yes, I'm one of them. But that's not why I think the Undead are the best race in classic World of Warcraft. Blizzard fucked them up from Cataclysm on, but as I hope I've explained to you in this video, they were once at the very top of Warcraft's narrative design. It's just such a good thing that we can enjoy that era of WoW again with Classic, free from the modern corruption that has plagued Blizzard Entertainment. Fuck. Well guys, thanks for watching. We come to the end of the video once again. Are you sad? Are you relieved? Whatever the case, leave a like, leave a comment. I would really like to know whether or not you agree with me that Forsaken are the best race in WoW, which they are by the way. I've already explained it. Why would you have any different opinion? But if you do have a different opinion, let me know about it. And would you like me to talk about the other races in this game? Would you like me to talk about those muscle-bound green juicer orcs, or the Tauren who I've already insulted in this video? Would you like me to talk about gnomes? Oh wait, I've already talked about gnomes. In any event, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you in the next video guys. Have a great day. Bye bye.